Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Thursday, the 25th of... What month is this? You know what? It's so cold right now in this room. That's why I have my jacket on. It's the 25th of October. I had a bit of a senior moment there. 2018. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just turn the light on, which I forgot to do. Thanks for a little bit of lighting for me. So welcome to my YouTube channel where we occasionally do things that are a bit off the cuff and ad-libbed in the world of weather. We're going to be looking at this weekend's system for the east, which is going to produce nor'easter conditions. And one of the things that happened overnight and during the day today is that the weather models have trended just a little bit nastier. I don't want to overstate it. A little bit nastier, perhaps a little longer in the way of rain. The gales have come back a bit stronger on the wind profile. Basically, we are looking at winds that are going to probably gust along the immediate coast to about 50 miles an hour or so. There will be at least a 1 to 2 inch rainfall with some locally higher amounts, and coastal flooding, which will be through at least one high tide cycle, and for some places it might wind up being 2, depending on how this low times out with the high tides. And coastal flood watches are up for the entire coastline from New Jersey on through southern New England, Long Island, and southern Connecticut, and in the areas surrounding New York City. It's actually a fairly quiet night across the U.S. When you take a look at the watches and warnings on the Weather Service's weather.gov site, I pulled up the map. You can't really even see the colors that represent the coastal flood watches that are up, because they're using this sort of light, I don't know, it's a bluish green color, but it's on the light side, and you barely can make it out. We also have wind advisories that have been put up preemptively for the winds for the land counties here in New Jersey. A few other pockets with a couple of wind advisories up, and really that's it. Even where it's raining, we don't even have flood watches up, which is a good thing. And this is an overrunning precip that's kind of moving right along. There's not a whole lot from the standpoint of severe weather going on. There were a couple of severe thunderstorm, some marine warnings that were up. The area of marginal risk tonight extends from southeastern Louisiana right along the immediate Gulf Coast of the Florida Panhandle, and that general area of thunderstorms pushes up into Alabama and Georgia, and in a small, the arrow actually just kind of loops right there along the South Carolina coastline. So this is the Gulf low that is coming out. There are other showers tonight showing up on the radar, which we'll pull up here the full the tight view of the radar to give you a good sense of how much rain is actually going on down in in the southeast. And where is it? Come on, here we go. There it is. So that's what the radar looks like right now as of 7:06. We've got some heavy downpours in there, 1 or 2 thunderstorms, but not a lot when it comes to severe weather. And there really isn't too much going on in Central and South Florida at the moment. Most of the showers are focused in northeastern Florida and also in northwestern Florida on the Panhandle. So all of this, part of this Gulf system that's going to be turning up the East Coast in short order. And as you know, as we said, the models have gotten a shade nastier. Let's call it a shade nastier with this. But no issues tonight, clearly, with high pressure from from eastern Canada, kind of holding everything at bay as best as it can. So it keeps things dry for the northeast anyway for Friday. But watch the low as the rains spread by Friday morning, raining through South Carolina, much of Georgia, into North Carolina, Western Virginia, southern West Virginia, and then through the lower Ohio Valley and on up northwest of there. The high to the north is kind of pressing down, so the flow in those areas is more east or southeast, and it's not really getting warm sectored very well. The low center moves into southeastern Georgia by Friday afternoon, so there's a bit of a warm front that's setting up right along the Carolina coast there. And you also, by the way, now going into tomorrow evening, you see how these isobars kind of bend down? This is the ridge to the north. This is what happens sometimes. You get cold air that tries to dam down the Appalachian Mountains, and the cold kind of gets trapped east of the mountains. In the wintertime, that's a very important feature to look for. With what we're dealing with here, it's going to mean for very raw conditions in a lot of areas in the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But by Friday evening, the leading edge of the rain is just about to southern New Jersey, southern Pennsylvania. You can see where the low center is, right along the South Carolina coast around Myrtle Beach. There's another low in eastern Kentucky here that's just going to weaken as the coastal low lifts up. And now, of course, we're getting into the wind and rain that moves into the northeast to southern New England and points northward on Saturday. This is where the pressure gradient gets very, very tight. You'll notice the GFS is pretty aggressive, has a low there in Chesapeake Bay. Models are sort of differing on where the position of the low is, but the bottom line is that that's a really tight pressure gradient between the high to the north. You have pressures up over 1030 in northern Maine, 1,030 millibars, to a 998-ish low. Let's just bring it down to 96 and just and go with that in Chesapeake Bay. So a 96 or a 98 low. Now that's a pretty sizable pressure gradient there. Not a whole lot of miles between northern Maine and down into Chesapeake Bay, and you're talking about almost 32 or 34 millibars of pressure change over that short distance. And by the way, as that colder air pushes down the northern fringe of that precip, you'll notice a little hint of blue there, so there might be some sleet or wet snow well up into upstate New York and into Vermont and New Hampshire. This is now Saturday afternoon, so we've got the surface low sitting in northern Delaware. The gradient is relaxing from central New Jersey south, but it still remains pretty tight from central New Jersey north and east through New England. And then the low is right over New York City by Saturday evening. At this point, I think the bulk of the rain will be north and northeast of New York City, and there won't be too much going on to the south and west of there with just some scattered activity. So it leads me to be optimistic as far as Sunday is concerned. With the surface low moving up into upstate New York by Sunday morning, there should be some drying here, so it may not be too bad a day. And of course, if you take a look at back in the western parts of Wisconsin, western part of Wisconsin, you've got another low diving down. So this is the second part of that upper trough swinging around. Fairly fast-moving, weak low that moves offshore Monday morning with a few showers, and then out that goes. And by the way, on the lower right is, I've been saying Otis, it's actually Oscar. I stand corrected. So on the lower right is what might be Tropical Storm Oscar, which most models do develop, and the Hurricane Center does have a 90% chance of this developing in the next 5 days. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I can't see that it's gotten better organized, or at least organized enough that there's a subtropical or a tropical depression at 8 o'clock, at least from what my eyes tell me. But we'll have a Hurricane Center update at 8 to see where they take us with this. But ultimately, that's going to wind up staying out to sea. So what's really happening here is that you're just getting some subtle changes. It's not really... What prevents this from being a really intense nor'easter? Well, two things. First off, when you look at the upper air, the fact that you have this second system upstream that is diving in right behind this one, it's acting as a kicker to move it along, and it lifts it up and around. But you don't have, whenever you have a system like this where they're so close together, there's only so much room in the atmosphere. And it appears to me that that second shortwave is impacting the potential strength of of the first one. So instead of having a pretty, sharp, negatively tilted trough northwest southeast, you've got fractured energy. You've got one piece that is lifting up for Saturday, and the second piece that's coming down for Sunday night into Monday. So rather than have one strong system, you've got two weaker systems. But really, what's the only thing that's really changed here is that the high to the north is just holding on a little bit longer than what was modeled the last 2 days or so. When we look at the system that's up in eastern Canada right now, it takes a little bit longer for that to get out, and it's holding the surface high in a bit longer. So the pressure gradient gets tightened up. If this low, in fact, is going to wind up weakening from where it winds up in northern Delaware, and then eventually moves on up into upstate New York, it's actually going to fill or weaken. If this were a strengthening storm where we would be seeing the pressures dropping down into the 980s or 970s, as some of the models were doing back a little over a week ago, we would be experiencing quite a nor'easter here Friday night and Saturday. Instead, it is going to be, I would say, probably let's call it on the moderate side. I'm not really overly concerned about it, but it is going to get windy for a while when you get that really tight pressure gradient in there. And the models all, I think, are reflecting fairly, I believe, what to expect. Here's the wind field for Saturday morning. So the yellow would be 30 knots, and that actually comes inland of the coast from Cape May up to about New York City, and most of Long Island experiencing roughly 30 knots of sustained wind. So certainly you get gusts into the 40s and maybe even upwards of 50 miles an hour. Take a look at this. If the GFS is right late this afternoon, for a small area of the eastern part of Suffolk County on Long Island, and even touching parts of southeastern Connecticut, Saturday morning to early afternoon, you could see 40. That red area is 40 knots sustained or higher. So that certainly could be gusts of 50 or more. And we're talking about on land and not just in the surrounding waters. At this point, though, the gales have already subsided. And as far as the coastal flooding is concerned, just want to show you here on Saturday morning, you've got this tight gradient and these easterly winds. So this is the high tides that are occurring during the early morning hours till daybreak Saturday morning will be problematic. I think there'll be minor to moderate coastal flooding from New Jersey to southern New England. There's some question about the second high tide for later on. The Weather Service is emphasizing that tide as well, which is the late afternoon and early evening high tide, as also being on the high side. So it's at least one and possibly two tide cycles here that could be problematic before the low moves out to the north. Rainfall is going to be on the order, I believe, of 1 to 2 inches at least. And don't be surprised, as the model has this stripe here of 2 to 3 inches plus. That could wind up being anywhere, really. I think it would probably be more focused to the coast than inland. It's going to depend on where the actual surface low tracks. But somebody's going to wind up with 2 or 3 inches out of this, and I'm sure there'll be the usual suspect number of flood advisories and possibly even some flood warnings, or even the flash flood warning that might pop up out of all of this. The overall pattern, by the way, going forward is going to be on the busy side. I think that's probably a good way to describe it. We are not really seeing any kind of blocky scenario. I think weather troughs and ridges are going to be moving along, and you'll wind up with a cold front or two, cold front and weather systems coming through every couple of days. Here's the middle part. After Monday, we get a little bit of ridging here in the eastern states before the next trough swings in for the end of the week and next weekend. And actually, there's a pretty distinct shortwave trough here for next Saturday night in the Ohio Valley, I'm sorry, in the lower Mississippi Valley, and another shortwave trough that's dropped into the Rockies that's going to drop southward and then eventually try to lift up to the northeast. So at the very least, you want to describe this as being some kind of transitional pattern or some sort of evolving pattern going forward. I think there's we're heading somewhere. Where we're going to wind up, I don't know, but I'm just looking at all these chess pieces that are being moved around in the short and intermediate term that we'll probably see ups and downs, cold fronts, waves on those fronts, depending on track. Who knows? Some runs have lows going up to our west, some lows having going just to our south. We could take this run. I'm going to let me just use the wider view so we can at least look at what's going on across the nation. And by the way, for you snow lovers, I guess I can put the this is what it looks like over the next 10 days in terms of snowfall across the U.S. Central and northern Rockies, some areas in northern Minnesota, and on up into northern New England, central and northern New England, and parts of upstate New York, getting into some snow over the next 10 days. Nothing, overly unusual in seeing something like this. And with respect to how it looks on the surface, and run it all the way through on the 10 days. So this is through Sunday. So actually, the GFS is actually being a little generous with snow amounts from this system coming up. Now, I don't know how much, if any of it, winds up staying on the ground with the way everything's playing out. But some snow amounts in the mountains. Again, all of this is going to be elevation driven. And then going forward, for next week, it's the Rockies that start playing catch up. And you also, by the way, see a very bullish view of snowfall in southeastern Canada, getting quite a bit of snow cover here added to it going into the first days of the month of November. Okay, so full U.S. view here to show you what the latest GFS does. So here's our system here running up the coast. It gets out, weak system on Monday, dry Tuesday and Wednesday. Here comes a cold front that basically falls apart when it reaches the coast Wednesday night. Waits for a stronger wave to come out for Friday. That brings a front through. And by the way, if you look in the lower right, there's Oscar on the GFS, which initially it turns east and then turns it back westward, and then just kind of gets absorbed by this frontal boundary that sets up for next weekend, Saturday night and Sunday, as a front stalls along the east coast and low pressure runs along it, and on it goes. It's, as always, when you get deep into the long range, it's almost an exercise in futility to really spend a whole lot of time looking at it. I don't know. I got to tell you, I'm not overly excited about what's going on in the long term in general. Again, it looks like we're kind of in some sort of transitional phase. Chess pieces being moved around, as I said, to maybe take us to whatever pattern we're going to have for the winter months. But we've got a long process here to work through. Now, out in the tropics, thanks to Tropical Tidbits, showing you the GOES 16 visible and shortwave and the IR, and you can see the system that they're watching. Looks like there might be some kind of surface circulation there, trying to get underneath where the convection's blowing up. Clouds are sort of moving all over the place, so there's probably some shear here, but it's definitely taking on the look of, at the very least, a subtropical system. And I wouldn't be surprised if we wind up having this be upgraded to a subtropical depression or tropical storm at some point over the next couple of days. And there are no land masses. I just brought up the model track guidance here, which actually is considering where it is and what's going on. It's fairly tightly clustered, turning it northwest and then west and even west southwestward, where it winds up getting to about between 25 and 30 degrees north and almost to about 60 degrees west. before you have the models, just about all of them, recurving it to the north and northeast. The GFS late this afternoon decided to, bring it more to about 65 west, or a little bit west of 65 before it gets absorbed. But this is what the model track guidance is showing. It matches up pretty well with what's going on in the upper air out there. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this unless we get some kind of surprise going through the weekend. So it really is all about this this nor'easter for later Friday night into Saturday night across the Mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast, and of course it'll be coming to an end in the Mid-Atlantic states on Saturday while it's going on in the Northeast, and then hopefully Sunday winds up being a bit of a better day, which would be quite nice. Trying to, what did I do with the U.S. satellite? I hid it away somewhere. Yep, there it is. So here's, by the way, here's the U.S. satellite tonight. And it's kind of loaded with clouds going back all the way into the southern plains, although there really isn't a whole lot of weather going on back out to the west. It really is with the surface Gulf low that is near or just east of southeastern Louisiana this evening. And a lot of that moisture now, the high clouds, just about to our area here, but that's all going to get suppressed to some degree overnight and through the very first part of Friday dayside before the clouds begin to sweep northward and take over. So I think that pretty much covers it, folks. Like I said, there really isn't a whole lot happening. So real fast self-promotion here, just to bring, if you haven't heard, because God knows I've said it enough times, but I do have this so-called platform. Actually, it isn't a so-called platform. It is a platform, and it's on Patreon, and it gives you a lot of good weather coverage. So if you are interested in getting more weather, this is a good, I think it's a good place to go to. You get stuff from me all day long, original content. We do an exclusive live stream. We try to do one every day for Patreon users, for just the Patreon users, or as my buddy Phil Buzz calls us Patriots. And we did one this morning at 10:30 where we we live streamed the new NAM as it was coming out. And that, by the way, is something I am going to do as we get into the winter months, particularly when snow is going to be a big issue. I will be doing things like live streaming the weather models during the time that they're coming out, so we can analyze them together and see where they are, what adventures they're going to be taking us on. So if you'd like to be part of that, and especially if you're in the area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, Philadelphia, New York City, New Jersey, Long Island, Hudson Valley, it'll be a good handy thing to have. And by the way, you can also message me at any time, and I will respond to you in a timely fashion. So give it a check out. I put the link up on the chat if you are interested. And that is, it's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. All right, on to the boards. Got a nice crowd tonight, and Israel looking for a nice, some nice weather on Sunday. I think you'll probably see at least some breaks of sun, or at least some brightening of skies. I see my my buddy Phil is on. Savage Players, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you for the very kind words. I'm happy to hear that you're a fan of my live streams. You know, sometimes I do tend to go long. Sometimes my live streams are over an hour, and I took some gentle criticism from somebody, said that I should keep them at 20 minutes. But sometimes we get on to subject matters, and I try to get to all of your questions, and before you know it, an hour has gone by. Anyway, thank you very much, Savage Players. Again, I really, really appreciate hitting Super Chat. Potential ridge over the eastern U.S. at the end of the period. Yeah, it's there, Ethan Bean. You know, I don't know. I'm not sensing. There are times when I look at the upper air and I kind of have a good sense of where it's going in the longer term. And then there are times when I look at it and I just can't get my head around it. And I think that's where I'm at right now. I've seen the long range change quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 days. I'm not 100% sure why that is, but it has been doing that. So maybe that's why I'm not getting that good feel for where we're going to go in the long term. Charles Baker, Mirtha Gunter, Deanna Nye, Diudan Kumar, Tom Gorsuch, Johnny Quest, and Box 505, Ethan B. Nice to see everybody here. James NASCAR, Doug Crum, Patricia Jackson, Robert Hurley, and on and on. So collective hello to everybody, by the way. D.O. Nankumar, the second low that sweeps looks like an Alberta Clipper if it was winter. Actually, that's, one of the things that struck me about the pattern that we're in right now is that if this were even a month from now, I think that you would probably see a lot more areas getting involved with snow than what you're seeing now, because we're still into the month of October. I think, I was discussing this with a colleague, with Joe Rayo last night on the Joe and Joe show. I didn't quite understand. There was, judging by the web traffic that I got back early this week, I was actually quite shocked. There was like almost a frenzy about what was coming for this weekend, and I think the trigger mechanism was the idea that Noreaster, the word Noreaster coming into the conversation, somehow automatically got connected with snow, and people sort of forgot the calendar. It's the 25th of October here. And, they said, October 29, 2011, and a few other dates that got thrown up. Yeah, of course, those were so incredibly rare. The occurrences so rare during the month of October, even in parts of upstate New York and into New England. It just doesn't happen that often. And when it does, it's got to be, an absolutely perfect setup. And usually it's driven more by a very intense feature in the upper atmosphere, a very cold, strong upper air trough, and we really didn't have that kind of setup this time around. So I was actually kind of surprised at how much interest was being generated by all of this. Michael M 1996. What are the odds for showers on Sunday, or will it be completely dry? I'm banking on it being completely dry. I have a friend of mine who's got a car show on Sunday morning that he's organizing, and he can't have a drop of rain, not even a drop of drizzle or mist. And I told him I'm pretty sure that it's going to be dry from beginning to end during the day on Sunday. Might not be picture perfect, but it should be rain free and drizzle and mist free. Fingers crossed on that. As long as everything keeps moving along, and I don't see why it shouldn't, because you've got that next weather system coming into the Great Lakes and diving down right behind it. It should improve on Sunday. Certainly the rain's going to get out of the way, because you're going to see the rain actually start to taper off from south to north during Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening, and possibly even faster than that. Matthew Warman, what do the ML Cape and wind crossovers mean on tropical tidbits? I got to tell you, Matthew, I'm not one that uses that very much. I got to talk to somebody that uses those maps and looks at the Cape actually measures the relative how unstable the atmosphere is, and it is a good tool but not a perfect tool when it comes to thunderstorms. But I don't, there's so many technical things that you can look at that it's almost impossible to look at all of them. And that's one particular tool I don't spend a lot of time on. So let me hold that question, and I will get one of my buddies who works with this stuff on a regular basis to give you an answer on that. Okay, so next time you come on, remind me of that question, and hopefully I'll have an answer for you. I know Delvin wants 85-minute streams, but you can't please everybody. That's right, Israel. And look, you know how hard it is to ad-lib for 85 minutes? Ryan Ford, the Clipper system is not going to produce any frozen precip. There's no cold air, buddy. Not this time around. Again, if this was a month from now, we probably would be looking at a different scenario. I do look kind of spiffy. They should run me through a car wash. I'm freezing in here. It's just really, really cold. It's 61. Okay, I'm cold. I don't. Dio Nankumar, I don't think there'll be any threat of tornadoes, but I'll tell you something. Joe and I were discussing the fact that the vertical motions that are going to be result of this system that's coming up with the low are pretty impressive, and we are going to. I wouldn't be shocked to see some thunderstorms Saturday morning with the area of rain as it moves up. So don't be too shocked if you hear some thunder and see some heavy downpours. Weather quiet, Ryan Kong, up in Minnesota. Yeah, remember, October is usually a very quiet month, and this month has been a lot more volatile with all the other things that have been going on between Hurricane Michael and a few other weather systems. So it's, to some degree, tonight represents how Octobers usually are, which is a pretty quiet, calm month, but then it does rev up a bit as we move into the month into next week and beyond that, because of the fact that the pattern does look busy, getting weather systems to be moving across the country on a fairly regular basis. Ashante Stevens, there's no potential snowstorm for the Northeast. Except when we're talking about some wet snow in the higher elevations, well into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. And even there in those areas, it's going to wind up probably changing over to rain anyhow. Those spots in elevation driven, but nowhere close to the big cities, obviously. And you have to go up well north of I-90, both on the New York State side and on the Massachusetts side. At least from what I see. I don't know where you heard this stuff. I do know that and I was talking before about not understanding all the interest. That isn't quite true. I know how it evolved, and that was because of the fact that there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of social media chatter, and the snow word was thrown around, and it was done with no context, and as a result, people start, clicking and getting interested in all of this stuff. So I'm the guy that I wait for that sort of stuff to happen. So I can write and say, no, that's not what it is. It's something else. So I guess I reap the benefits of the hypesters out there by trying to be someone who's much more sensible when it comes to this sort of thing. Who will I ask about the Cape and the wind crossovers? I'll ask Bill Goodman. He works with that stuff a lot. So I'll ask him, and I'll do a little research on my own to see what it means. A lot of times, I think Joe Rayo put it well when he said the fact that he and I, when it comes to this sort of stuff, you could sort of view us as general practitioners, where we know a little bit about all the different subject matters. We know a little bit about each one, but we're not really expertise in one particular area. Okay, if for me, it's probably I look at winter weather and snow forecasting as where my strengths are, and other people, there are people who are just into severe weather. There are people that are just into tropical weather. There are people who are into long range. So I'll see if I can run this by my buddy Bill Goodman and get an explanation with regards to all of this. And yeah, of course, Johnny Quest, we can watch the snow on the Mount Washington webcams just about any time. Ryan Ford, there's the teleconnections tonight. I looked at them today. There's nothing too much you can gain out of them. They're pretty flat. But I'll tell you what, I'll I'll put a link up if anybody is interested. You can here's the direct link to the teleconnections, which are updated once a day. You'll notice that all three major indices are basically straddling the neutral line in the longer range period. So they're not giving us any kind of strong signals in one direction or another. Yes, Scott Burley, you're right. I am an expert in picking shoes, the wrong ones, and totally mismatching, as was my adventure the other day. Any severe weather on Saturday? Again, I think there could be some thunderstorms. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, it wouldn't shock me if a marginal risk goes up somewhere. Wouldn't surprise me with what's going on. That's a pretty solid trough that's lifting up to the northeast. Got a really cold pool of air aloft and some good forcing of Atlantic tropical moisture coming in from the east-southeast. So, you know what? Not impossible. All right? Not impossible. Okay. Well, I always, you know, when you give me this question about the fact APAR moist the best, whatever that means, one. High winds toppling trees to power outages. You know, that is something that you can't really predict. I mean, you know, there are times when a 35, 40 mile an hour wind gust will knock a tree down if it's compromised. Look, there'll be gusts into the 40s right along the immediate coast. Wouldn't be surprised to see some gusts briefly into the low 50s. Wouldn't shock me. Could it take a tree down here and there that's compromised? Sure. Might there be some power issues? I guess there could be, as there are in most nor'easters. Ethan Bean, above average precip for the East U.S., South and Northeast, setting up potential relative storm track for the winter of 18-19 with factors leaning towards wet mid-Atlantic winter setup with increasing split flow. All right, I won't argue with that. Is that your analysis, or is that somebody, or did you get that from somewhere? I'm just curious. I'm not criticizing you by any means. I'm just wondering because yeah, I mean, I guess from what you're saying, sure, why not? I'll call you Parma. Okay. You know, be really careful with these winter forecasts. I'm just going to tell you, we are due for a subpar year when it comes to snowfall. Just bear that in mind. We've had a lot of above average snowfall years, and one of these years we're going to wind up with a below average year, and maybe even a well below average year. I don't know if that's the case, and I'm talking about my neck of the woods, which is basically eastern PA to southern New England. Not bad, Ethan Bean, for 14. It's your analysis. Okay. It's your forecast. You stick with it, and let's see what happens. Come back to me in 2 months, and let's review that, okay? Jason, soil is wet. Yeah, you know, that's probably correct. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, there probably will be some trees that get knocked over. The ground is pretty wet. And we haven't had much warm weather, by the way, since the middle of the month. So it's not as if the water's been baked out of the ground. So I'm sure there is going to be some trees that have been compromised. All right, hold on. I'll give one more. GFS and FV3 have shifted with Oscar. I did see that. I did notice. Well, okay. Well, the FV3 shows a Cat 1 approaching Florida. Weather Hub. Getting into this time of year, something like that is extremely rare, okay? Should I be on the chat tomorrow? I'll get my answer. It depends, Matthew. I don't know if, you know, if I can get a hold of them. But I'll tell you what, why don't you, just to make it easier, go on my Facebook page and just send me a message, and I'll see if I can get, I can forward the message over to Bill and see if he can answer it. All right? I think that's probably, that might work. And I'm not going to jinx the winter, Jason Schaefer. The winter will be what the winter will be. You know that me saying it is not going to have any effect on what happens. All right, folks, coming up on 40 minutes tonight, so let's call it a night. Patreon link will be going up. By the way, I just put the teleconnections up there for any of you that are interested in wanting to look at it on a daily basis, just take that link and bookmark it. Thanks for being here. We are going to have the Joe and Joe show tonight at 9:15 on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we'll probably do another live stream on Patreon at 10:30 so that we could have most of the NAM, just to get one last look at the weather for Friday night into Saturday. The Joe and Joe show will probably be uploaded to YouTube tomorrow morning, and then we'll do our live stream tomorrow night. Saturday, I'm going to be in a bit of flux because I'll be on the road, and we'll be. I'll be trying to figure out when I'll be doing the live streams going forward, because I'm going to be on the road for about a week. So, but there will be live streams done, unless there's a day or two where there's not much weather going on, and I may take a bit of a break. I can't do a random live stream at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Israel. My schedule is pretty tight during the day, so it's got to be when when it works, and it usually works either at 6 or 7 o'clock. I just don't have the time to do one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, so let's leave it at that. Have a great evening, and we will see you either later or tomorrow. Yes, the Bayonne presentation in New Jersey on Wednesday, November 7th looks like it's a go, okay? And I'll talk more about that going forward. Have a great evening, everybody.